So for this video, we're gonna go into the introduction of Unreal. So once you have exported all your meshes and exported all your textures, the first thing you want to do is install Unreal if you don't have it installed. To install Unreal, just come to the website unreal.com, unrealengine.com, and you will be in the main page. Then if you have an account, just create an account and then click download. When you click download, you're gonna have these two selections. This is if you're gonna sell a game or create an executable, and this is if you're just going to do free projects. Either or is fine because it's the same Unreal, and they're not gonna charge you regardless unless you publish the game. So just get the creator license, and then once you download Unreal and install it, you're going to have the launcher. So once you launch it, this is what you're gonna have, and the first thing you want to do is click on the Unreal Engine tab and go into library and select an engine type. So you press the plus button and then select the version. We're going to be working on 4.26.1, and I already delivered a project in GIT tutorials. What you're going to do is you're going to download that project and unzip it. So once you unzip the whole project, you're going to have these files. All you want to do is double click on NJ tutorials if you already have the engine installed. Once you have the engine installed, you will be able to open this project and double click on this. You're going to have a project already set up for you guys, and I'm gonna open it on my end, and you're gonna see it's gonna start loading. It might take a while since it's the first time you guys open it, but this is what you're going to have. So Unreal is basically like divided like Maya, kind of. You have your viewport, which you can to navigate in the viewport is easy. You just press the right click and then use the WSAD buttons like you're playing a game to navigate around, and everything is, this is how you navigate in the viewport. So if you don't like the speed at which you're moving, you can decrease the speed by scrolling on the wheel while you're navigating, and it'll slow down a little bit. You can also reduce the camera movement if you go up here, and you by default is 4, and you can put it lower and the camera will move slower. I'll leave it at 4 because I can control my speed with the scroll wheel. Then we have, like Maya, the regular translate tools, which are W, E, R. So if you click on any object, you're gonna have the move tool, the rotation tool, and the scale tool. And then for each transform, you're gonna have a little section here. So this relates to translate. So every time you move it, you see that it's snapping at a 10 unit increment. You can put it at 100 and you see that it snaps further, and it's snapping towards the grid. So by default it's 10, but you can use it to align stuff. You can reduce it or increase it to align stuff better. The same thing with the rotation. With the rotation, it'll rotate in a 10 degree increment, and you're gonna be able to see it in the screen while you rotate. And the same thing, if you turn it off, you have decimals. If you can also increase it by 15, and they have like little presets that you can modify it to. Also, you got the scale. Scale is the same thing by 0.25. So every time you scale, it'll scale by 0.25. And you can turn it off or select a default scale. So that's how you navigate in Unreal. Selecting stuff is like Maya, just left click and you can select stuff. You can, if you want to select multiple stuff, you got to press shift and clicking. You're able to select multiple stuff. Then this little square up here, if you click on it, it'll give you the orthographic views. So this is like a side view, another side, like a front view, and then the top view. And all the meshes are going to be in wireframe. And then if you want to go back in any of these windows, you click on the square, it'll make it big, square, make it small. Same thing here. Then we have in this section our perspective, top view, bottom view, left, right, front, and back. By default, everything that shows in your screen, you can turn off what is displayed. Let's say you don't want to display the static meshes, and it'll just hide all the static meshes. This one that says lit, that is how the viewport renders what you're seeing. So right now in lit mode, you're gonna see all the global illumination, all the lighting presets, everything. If you put a light in the scene, like I'm gonna do now, you're gonna be able to see the lighting. Then if you click on it, you have an unlit mode. Unlit mode is gonna disregard the light, but it's going to just pop out all the base colors. So if you have a scene with your textures, only the default diffuse map is going to show. Then we got wireframe, detail lighting. This is the baked lighting, but with detail. So if your normal maps, if you have normal maps, it's going to just show you all the crevices, how the light interacts with your maps. Then you got lighting only. This will do the lighting, but without no normal map information. The reflection, and it's gonna show this like funky view of like mirrors everywhere. This is how the reflections are calculated. Then player collision, you can see all the player where the player is gonna collide. These green ones are interactable objects, physics objects. These are static meshes that you're just going to be able to collide, but you cannot move them. Then visibility collision means all the collisions that the player can see. Sometimes you have a collision that it doesn't show. Grab a mesh and you're just gonna say to not collide, no collision, and it's just gonna disappear. And then we have all these optimization view modes, which is light complexity. This will show you how complex is your lighting situation. If you have fog, if you have God rays, if you have transparency in some of the maps, if your lighting are overlapping, it's going to show you all that with this one. Light map density. So each mesh that you bring into Unreal is going to have a light map density. That's basically when you create your UVs, it's gonna take your UVs for that mesh and is going to create a light map out of it, and the light map will store all the lighting information when you bake. Then stationary overlap. Here's gonna show you all the lights that are overlapping. So if I grab this one and start doing this, you see that it's showing me all the lights that are being overlapped. And you can notice that this X appeared. That means that there is more than 3 lights overlapping. So the sun is 1 light, 2, 3, 4, and this is the 5th. You can only handle 4 lights overlapping. And you might say, well, I cannot just light a whole scene with 4 lights. Well, this light are stationary lights. We have 3 types of lights: movable, which you can stack as many as you want. These are dynamic lights. So if you're a player, if you change the color, you're going to see the color change in real time. Stationary lights are lights that bake to the mesh, but at the same time, when the player crosses through the light, it also interacts with the character. Then static lights are lights that do not interact with the player at all. They're just used to bake the lighting into the world. So you can have many of the static lighting. For the most part, in games and for scenes, we use a lot of static lighting and not so much movables, unless we are going to do something like a cinematic, or if it's a high-end game, you use some movable dynamic lighting, but the hit on performance is really high. So most games just do stationary lights and static lighting. Then we have the shader complexity. This will calculate your whole scene and it will check. So if you have a lot of transparency, you're going to see your scene starting to go up, and you see this crosshair in the middle. So wherever I put the crosshair, that's where it's going to calculate. And you can see the color variation because there's a plane with a lot of transparency. That's why we have a hit performance there. This will calculate your shaders and how dense your geometry is. So here you can see I have the player, and it has a gun and this and some arms, and this has a lot of geometry. So compared to everything else, it's kind of dense, but it's not as bad. And then quad draw just shows you how bad the quads are and how dense your quads are in the viewport. We always want to work in lit or unlit. So then up here you have your regular buttons. So you have the save current, will save your scene. Source control is if you're working on a source control program like Perforce. You have a bunch of them. You have Perforce, Git, Plastic, and Subversion. So any of those you can just connect, and whenever you work on a file, you can check it out and then submit it, and it will do all the back end for that specific program. Then you have modes, and I'm going to touch on modes later. You have the content browser, which is down here. So if you close this by mistake, you can get it back by just clicking on content, and this is where all your files are stored. So I created already a folder for Lodge. So the way you create folders here is right click and create a folder, and here's where all your files are going to be, and I'm going to explain those in more detail later. Then you have your marketplace, which is basically the marketplace of Unreal. It will take you to the website. You got your settings, which here you can set how good your scene is going to be looking. So if you press cinematic, it's just going to bump all the options all the way up so that you can create a cinematic. Epic is basically like playing a game. You got low settings, medium settings, high settings, epic settings. Then the material, what type of, the quality of the material that you're going to be using. Then preview rendering, we always use shader model 5. If you're going to be developing like for a phone or VR, you do Android ES 3.1, and then you have the iOS for Mac. Other important things in this menu is the plugin manager. This is where Unreal stores all the plugins that it contains. Then you have your project settings, which contains all the project settings. This is where you can set up your controls, your maps, what map is going to load first on the levels, all the settings for Android if you're gonna develop for Android. The physics, how the physics is going to interact, all the rendering options. So all the options for Unreal are gonna be here. We're not gonna touch on those. And then world settings, which world settings is always next to the detail. So if you click on anything, you're gonna always have the details for that object or the properties. So here you can change the size, the translation, you can change the material, you can set the collision, if it's gonna have the collision, the light maps, if it's gonna be visible or not. You can apply tags, so then when you're coding, you can search for a tag and call it out. And next to it is the world settings. The world settings deals with how you view the world here, how the Unreal is going to calculate your light map settings, which is important. So sometimes you can see that your shadows are going to be a little bit blocky. You can increase it, but at the same time, by increasing these numbers and decreasing these numbers, your performance hit is going to be larger and bake times are going to be really long. So it's for now, for us, the default is fine. We're not going to touch on those. Then you got the mega scans. So the mega scans, remember when I said that when you download Unreal, you also get Quixel and the mega scan library. So once you download the Quixel suite and you get mega scans, all the mega scan objects, you can just import it in the textures and the objects, and this is how you convert it into the Unreal materials. Then you got blueprints. This is basically the visual coding of Unreal. You got cinematics, which is to create videos or cinematic sequences. All those cinematics that you see on promotional videos on Fortnite, all those were created with Sequencer. Then you have the build button. This is where you build your lighting. So if I press build, it's just going to calculate my whole scene and build the lighting. It takes, depending on your scene, it's going to take a short amount of time or a long time, and it'll depend on the quality of the lighting. So if you do production, it was going to take a longer time, but the bake is going to come out really nice. Then you have the play, which, how the name says it, you can just play. And then you have the launch, and launch is basically cooking into a device. You can cook it into, if you launch it, you can launch a game into your own computer. You can launch the game into a phone, or you can launch it to a Quest or any device. So that's all just for the viewport.